It happens in under 3 minutes. That's all the time you have. You're the tactical action officer aboard an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer somewhere in the Philippine Sea. Your radar picks up an inbound contact. It's moving at Mach 8, roughly 6,000 miles per hour. It's not flying in a straight line, it's gliding, skipping across the upper atmosphere like a stone on water, dipping low, then climbing again. Your Aegis combat system, the most sophisticated shipboard defense architecture ever built, is running intercept calculations. And then the system does something you've never seen in a drill. It returns a probability of zero, not low, not marginal, zero. There's a classified assessment buried inside a 2025 Pentagon report that describes exactly this scenario. They call it the zero intercept window. We'll come back to that. But first, you need to understand how the world got here. Because this is not a story about one missile. This is not about China being aggressive. This is not about a budget argument in Washington. This is about whether the physics of modern warfare have shifted so far, so fast, that the United States military's entire defensive architecture, built over 50 years and funded by trillions of dollars, is now functionally obsolete against one category of threat. That is not an opinion. That is the conclusion of the Atlantic Council, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Pentagon's own classified threat assessments. Stay with me on this. In October 2019, China rolled something new through Tiananmen Square during its National Day parade. Most Western analysts had seen parade footage before, rows of soldiers, rows of trucks, the usual theater of state power. But this time, something in the middle of that column stopped them cold. The DF-17, a missile mounted on a mobile launcher, carrying what looked like a flattened cone underneath, a hypersonic glide vehicle. Not a traditional ballistic missile that goes up and comes down in a predictable arc. Something different, something that the entire U.S. missile defense architecture was never designed to stop. Here's why that matters technically. A traditional ballistic missile follows what engineers call a Keplerian trajectory. It goes up into near space, arcs over, and comes down. Radar systems track that arc. Interceptors like the SM-3 are optimized for exactly that geometry. You know where it's going because physics tells you. But a hypersonic glide vehicle doesn't follow that arc. It detaches from its booster, then glides at hypersonic speeds inside the upper atmosphere, between 80,000 and 150,000 feet, maneuvering laterally, changing its approach angle, flying below the coverage horizon of most early warning radar systems. By the time your radar sees it clearly, you have at most 90 seconds to respond. Hold that number. 90 seconds. The DF-17 was unsettling, but China didn't stop there. By 2025, the Pentagon's annual report to Congress confirmed something that had only been whispered about in defense circles for 2 years. The DF-27, a conventional intercontinental ballistic missile with a hypersonic glide vehicle payload, had been fielded, not tested. Not paraded, fielded, operationally deployed. A weapon that can range American territory with a conventional warhead, not a nuclear one, traveling at speeds that make interception practically impossible with any system currently in the U.S. inventory. That's not China being aggressive. That's China solving a math problem. And the math is working in their favor. If you've made it this far, you already understand more about hypersonic weapons than 90% of people who write about them. Subscribe if you want the rest of the picture, because what comes next is the part the mainstream coverage never explains. What America is actually doing about this, and why the timeline matters more than the technology. Here's what the Pentagon won't say publicly in those exact words. The United States right now in 2026 does not have a single fielded hypersonic weapon of its own, not one. The Army's long-range hypersonic weapon program has been in development and testing for years. It's promising, but it is not yet a program of record. It is not sitting in an operational battery somewhere on Okinawa or Guam. And the Pentagon's own budget request for fiscal year 2026 cut hypersonics research and development spending from roughly $6.9 billion to $3.9 billion, a 35% cut, at the exact moment when Russia deployed its Oreshnik hypersonic ballistic missile to Belarus, a system that travels at Mach 10 and covers all of Europe, a system that, according to Russian military officials, no current NATO air defense system can intercept. Now watch what this means strategically. The Atlantic Council, whose analysis group includes former senior U.S. defense officials and nuclear policy experts, warned in late 2025 of what they called battlefield asymmetry. That's a careful phrase. What it means in plain English is this: one side can hit the other side cannot hit back at the same speed. That asymmetry, that gap, is not a theoretical future problem, it exists today. Russia is expected to manufacture close to 2,500 high-precision missiles in 2025 alone, across cruise, ballistic, and hypersonic classes. China already has the DF-17 and DF-27 in active service, and its DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missile can hold American carrier strike groups at risk from over 2,000 miles away. Meanwhile, U.S. defense planners are still in research and development, still testing, still waiting for programs to reach production. This is where it gets serious. Now we come back to that classified's assessment. The Zero Intercept Window document. What it describes isn't a single missile attack. It describes a coordinated salvo, multiple hypersonic glide vehicles launched simultaneously from different vectors, designed to saturate any point defense system through sheer geometry, not through speed alone, but through the combination of speed, maneuverability, and numbers. Your Aegis system doesn't fail because it's poorly designed. It fails because it was never designed for this. It was designed for a different era of warfare, and here's the part that connects directly to the Taiwan Strait. Defense experts with direct access to classified wargaming assessments have stated publicly in congressional testimony that if a conflict erupted over Taiwan today, the United States could exhaust its inventory of long-range precision munitions in roughly 1 week of sustained combat, operations 1 week. After that, the logistics chain, resupply, production surge, repositioning takes months, not days, months. Beijing knows this number. Their war planners have almost certainly run the same calculation. China's stated goal, confirmed in the Pentagon's 2025 China Military Power Report, is to possess the military capability to conduct decisive operations in the Taiwan Strait by the end of 2027, not 2035, not 2040, 2027. That is 18 months from today. The DF-17 didn't change the balance of power alone. The DF-27 didn't either. But together, with Oreshnik deployed in Europe and a US hypersonic program still waiting on production, they've created something specific, a window. And windows in military strategy are the most dangerous things in the world. So let's be direct about what we've covered. First, China and Russia have fielded operational hypersonic weapons that the United States cannot currently intercept with any deployed system. That is a technical fact, not a political argument. Second, the US hypersonic program is behind, not in theory, not in capability on paper, in actual fielded production. The budget cut in 2026 makes that timeline longer, not shorter. Third, and this is the one that should keep strategists up at night, the convergence of a 1-week missile inventory gap, 2027 PLA capability deadline, and a zero intercept probability against coordinated hypersonic salvos means the window for deterrence, not war deterrence, is closing, and deterrence once lost is extraordinarily difficult to rebuild. Do you think the United States is moving fast enough to close this gap before 2027? Because the answer to that question may determine the next decade of global stability. Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Fastest weapon ever built means nothing if the decision to use it comes too late. And right now, the clock is moving faster than the missiles.